Well, my friends, can I first say, as someone who, like quite a lot of us here, has been an active member of our party for many years, that when you hear, as we've just done, from the likes of John and Rina and Louis and Amit, you hear that and you feel confident that the future of our party is going to be in good hands. Now, yesterday morning, as Lord Chancellor, I joined our country's senior judges and lawyers in Westminster Abbey for the traditional service to mark the opening of the new legal year. Then we processed in all our finery, all our bling, across Parliament Square to Westminster Hall. It was a solemn and also a colourful occasion, a celebration of the long history and the ancient traditions of our legal system. But at heart, what was being celebrated, what was being honoured, was not wigs or robes and not ritual or protocol. It was the living constitutional principles which that ceremony affirms every year. The rule of law and the independence of our judiciary underpin our democracy and our very way of life. They are the cornerstone of our freedoms. No individual, no organisation and no government is above the law. And it used to be the case, it should be the case, that that principle is one held precious by every party in this country. And that is why I find the refusal by the leadership of today's Labour Party to rule out supporting illegal strikes is a shameful abdication of responsibility from a party that says it wants to govern this country. I believe, this party believes, in the rule of law and in our system of justice that protects the innocent, punishes the guilty, and gives voice to victims. And now, after 7 years of the Conservatives in office, crime is down by 1/3. More victims of serious crimes, and particularly sexual offences, are now coming forward because they're no longer silenced by a fear of stigma or mistrust. But of course, while that's good news, there's always more to be done. And that's why Amber Rudd and I are developing together a comprehensive strategy to tackle domestic violence and abuse, a pernicious crime that has been in the shadows for far too long in our country. And it's a Conservative government that is determined to tackle that. I want to pay tribute to our Prime Minister, Theresa May, who has been unwavering in the fight against injustice throughout her time in the Home Office and in Downing Street. She is a woman who is absolutely undaunted by whether a cause like modern slavery, or as we'll find out next week, racial disparities in our country are unfashionable to talk about, are in the shadows. She will do what is right for this country, and we will support her in that action. I also want to thank my outstanding ministerial team, Dominic Raab, Sam Giemer, Philip Lee and Richard Keane, our whips, Mike Freer and Charlotte Veer, and our PPSs, Lucy Fraser and Alan Mack. They all work incredibly hard for our party and for our country, and they deserve our thanks. The greatest challenge facing our criminal justice system today lies in our prisons. The men and women who work in our prisons are the unsung heroes of the criminal justice system. Day in, day out, they accept responsibility for more than 86,000 offenders to keep them secure and the public safe. And when I've gone around visiting prisons, listening to prison officers and to governors, what struck me has been their professionalism, their dedication, and their commitment not just to keep prisons secure, but also to do everything they can to help those prisoners make a change in their lives. And too often it's easy to forget this work. It goes unseen behind the high walls of our prisons. But we should all take this opportunity today to thank our prison staff for what they do on behalf of us all. Prison officers today face enormous pressure. The levels of violence inside our prisons is too high, and so too are cases of self-harm and of suicide among prisoners. Last year, the prison's ombudsman said that the arrival of new synthetic drugs into our prisons was a game changer. These drugs, smuggled in from the outside, were, he said, increasing violence, debt, poor health, and instability. And today, more and more of that drug traffic is being orchestrated by sophisticated criminal networks. Gangs smuggle not only drugs, but mobile phones for their operations. They use drones to drop as much as a kilo of drugs at a time within prisons. They stop at nothing, even spraying children's drawings sent to fathers or brothers inside with liquid synthetic drugs so that they can get the drugs inside the prison estate. I can't emphasize enough, this is not a cottage industry. It's not a matter of opportunism. This is serious, organized crime. And I'm determined that we should step up our efforts to track and target that crime, to block the supply lines, and to identify and bring to justice the gang leaders who are at the root of so much misery in our country. So today I can announce the start of additional intelligence-led counter-drone operations to disrupt drones as they enter prison airspace and, critically, to trace them back to the criminals involved. Inside the prisons, we've already deployed hundreds of sniffer dogs trained to detect drugs, and we're working with the technology companies to block mobile signals and drones within the prison walls. And today I can also announce pilots of a new generation of body scanners to add to our tools in the fight against drug smuggling. We've also ramped up our efforts to deploy more and better trained staff. Today we've got 868 more prison officers on duty than at the start of the year, meaning we're on course to hire 2,500 extra frontline officers by the end of 2018. And we're keeping them safer too. Training staff to use body-worn cameras, both to deter assaults, but also then to capture the evidence whenever those attacks do occur. We will not let up on action to ensure that our prisons are secure and that prison staff and prisoners are kept safe. Now, here today in Manchester, we're reminded inevitably of the loss and the grief this great city suffered when terrorists struck here last May. Struck at the most innocent and vulnerable of us all, at children emerging from a concert. As our Prime Minister said then, we cannot and must not pretend that things can continue as they are, and she called for action right across government to address the threat of terrorism and the extremism which generates terror. So we've stepped up work within prisons to contain dangerous extremists, opening separation units to stop our most toxic prisoners from being able to groom or intimidate others, And we've established a new counterintelligence unit to monitor and disrupt the evolving threat of extremism behind bars. But of course, safety and security are important in their own right, but they've got a broader purpose too. The real prize of a calm and ordered prison environment is to make it possible to transform those prisons into places of genuine reform and rehabilitation. All bar a tiny handful of prisoners will be released at the end of their sentence. And we cannot be satisfied with a situation in which nearly half of prisoners reoffend within a year of their release. That failure matters. And it matters to us as Conservatives, because in the end, the cost of reoffending is borne by the victims of those additional crimes. Now, let me be clear. Those who commit crimes are responsible for their actions. And successful rehabilitation has got to start with the prisoner himself wanting to make it work. And there are some who, no matter what support is offered, will show no remorse and no desire to change. Nothing can excuse crime. But we've also got to recognise that the problems our staff face day by day inside the prisons don't start at the gates. A quarter of prisoners have spent time in care. Many come from homes that were at best chaotic, at worst violent and abusive. And the cycle perpetuates through the generations. Nearly 2/3 of the sons of prisoners go on to commit crime themselves. Most prisoners, when they're assessed on arrival at prison for the first time, have the reading skills of an 11-year-old, and half have no qualifications whatsoever. Now, when these prisoners return to society, what I want is to see them able to get a job and keep it. I want them willing and able to take responsibility for themselves and their families, keeping on the straight and narrow and not falling back into their old ways. And I want more intensive rehabilitation also to take place in the community, particularly to tackle offenders who've got substance misuse and mental health needs. That means we need probation too to work better. So we have tough community sentences that command the confidence of the courts and the public. Now, rehabilitation does not mean that we somehow ignore the need for punishment and deterrence. But it means using the time when we've got people inside jail to maximise the chance that they will change their attitudes when they get out, spending as much time as possible in classrooms and in workshops, not just aimlessly banged up in cells. So I'm pushing ahead with reform. I'm giving prison governors new powers over how their prisons are run. Next year, every governor will be given the power to tailor education and training to the needs of their prisoners. They'll have more freedom to innovate, but they'll also be held to account for the results of their work. And that goes for us in the Ministry of Justice as well. Openness and transparency are powerful instruments of change, and the reports of prison inspectors shine a spotlight on problems. Where recommendations are made, they should be followed up. So I've set up a new task force charged with responding promptly and publicly to inspection reports and following those through with a programme of action to put matters right. And if we disagree with the inspector for some reasons, then we have a duty to provide a clear and public explanation of that. We have a particular responsibility towards young prisoners because we can't just sit back and allow them to become the adult offenders of tomorrow. Now, since we took office back in 2010, the number of young people in custody has plummeted by nearly 2/3. So we've now got only the most serious and the most difficult of young offenders behind bars. And inevitably, it's these youngsters who've also got the most complex needs. And youth custody can't just be the dumping ground for society's wider problems. So I can today announce a new investment of £64 million to entrench reform of youth custody. We will boost the number of frontline staff in youth offender institutions by a fifth. That's 120 additional recruits, including newly trained specialist youth justice workers who will be equipped to tackle the needs of young offenders in particular. We want to nip the cycle of offending in the bud before those youngsters grow any older. That's the best service we can give to law-abiding citizens of this country. And the work of overcoming the challenges in our prisons means we also have to look beyond the prison walls for solutions. It includes the work that Jeremy Hunt is leading across government on a new strategy for mental health. That'll help to ensure that offenders get the help they need both in prison and after release. And it embraces Justine Greening's drive to promote high-quality apprenticeships and first-class technical and vocational education, because that's what's going to give offenders, old and young, the chance to get steady quality work after their release. And the private sector has a role to play too. There's a new start-up, Redemption Roasters, which is working at Aylesbury Young Offender Institution in my own patch. And they're offering the young men there a full-time barista training programme with a real prospect of jobs afterwards. They're working, for example, with one 22-year-old lad who, in his own words, says he's never had any experience of working legit. And that young man is now about to begin his first job at Redemption's flagship coffee shop in central London. That is what a fresh start looks like. And from Timpson's to Greggs the Bakers to Holford's to the construction firm Mighty, more and more employers are appreciating what ex-offenders who've turned the page have to offer. The hard work and dedication of somebody who's committed to proving that they do deserve that second chance. And we need to take this further. That's why I'm today announcing a new national task force called the New Futures Network that will match offenders with employers and make sure that the training, what we do at the workshops in the prisons, matches the demands out there in the local job market, and that we change our offer as the job market outside changes too. The evidence shows that a former prisoner who's got work, who's got both the responsibility and the opportunities that a job provides, is far less likely to re-offend in the future. Getting prisoners into employment works. Now, this work of reform is ambitious and it's difficult. I'm going to be straight with you. I'm not going to stand here and promise you instant solutions. We're dealing with some of the most troubling and troubled people in society. But there are two things that, despite the difficulties, despite the challenges, still fire me up with optimism and with hope. The first is the success stories I've actually heard going around the prisons. There's the officer up in Northumberland who runs the recycling yard in his prison. He's built basic English and math skills into that work. And he's set up links on his own initiative with local businesses in order to secure jobs for his men when they've done their time. One of the prisoners in his team put it this way. He said, "Not only does this give us hope, it also gives us purpose in life." Or it's the prisoner in South Wales who told me how it was what staff had done there to maintain and strengthen contact between prisoners and their families that had finally brought home to him how much damage his criminal career and his absence in prison had caused to a partner and to kids whom he did actually love, and how that had made him determined, once he was released, not to let them down again. Or the amazing work by charities, from women's groups to churches to sports clubs, to get offenders to see that there is a better way than going back to a life of crime. And as we go forward, I want to see charities and voluntary groups, large and small, play an even stronger role as we implement our reforms. And the second thing that gives me hope and gives me confidence is what, after more than 40 years of membership, I know about our party. We say that our party, the Conservative Party, is the party of one nation. And we are at our best when we speak and act and work on behalf of every part of our country, when we strive to do our best for people from all walks of life, whatever their background, their accent, their beliefs, or the colour of their skin. And just as there can be no no-go areas, no city, no estate, no street that's somehow out of bounds for us in our campaigning, so there should be no area of policy, no social challenge, however tough, that we should fear to address. So let our government and our party work together with energy, with confidence, and with determination on the great cause of prison and penal reform. And through our efforts, let us be able to say that we passed to the next generation a country that is more fair, that is safer, that is more ready to offer the second chance, that above all is more just than the one that we inherited ourselves. Thank you very much.